Right, sometimes you just have the blues, right? You got to pick up your ukulele and have some fun. So what makes the blues sound the way it does? And so I was just improvising there a little bit. I got my baritone here. You can try this on any size ukulele, any tuning, but there are certain characteristics of the music. And let's look at some of the techniques that you might use, some of the chord choices you might use. I'm played in the key of E, which is a really great blues key. If you were to play, let's say in the G, C, E, A tuning, you might play in the key of A. It's going to be this basic chord shape. You want it to be bluesy? Make it a dominant 7th chord. That's the first little trick there. So if I just play, instead of just playing a regular E, I add this note, and that's going to give it this really nice bluesy feel. It's good to know what the blues progression is. I was basically playing E7, then I played what's called the 4 chord. I played A7, not just a regular A chord. You got to put that 7th in there. That note, it just takes you right into the sound of the blues. Then I played a B7 as well. So those are the basic harmonies, but you can find different ways of playing them in different parts of the fingerboard. Wherever your hand lies, believe it or not, there's one of those chords that's going to be right around there. And there's a certain scale that's really used a lot in the blues. And the basic pentatonic scale is a good place to start. If I look in a low position, it's 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 3. You can add a note to that they call the blue note. There it is. You can do that in different places. In this key, it's a B flat, 3rd fret of the 3rd string. That could also be played up an octave on the 6th fret of the high string. Now check out what I'm doing with my left hand. I love playing classical music and other styles where I wouldn't use such a wide vibrato. I'm pushing up and down. Usually when we do vibrato, we're moving our hand back and forth. I'm pulling the string, pushing it up. That's a big characteristic of the blues. They think, if you think of playing a piano, they call it playing in between the cracks of the, in between the keys. You can actually bend notes. So in order to do that, I'm putting down multiple fingers. That gives you a little bit more leverage to push up on the note. If I'm playing on one of the lower strings, I actually pull down towards the floor. The higher strings, you push up. It actually doesn't take that much effort to get the string to really change its character, whether you're doing sort of vibrato or these slow. Now, something I hear a lot of when people do bends on the ukulele, I often hear them not quite in tune. And you can actually, blues, you don't have to be spot on all the time, but if you are going for a certain sort of sound, it is good to practice playing a target pitch and actually bending to the right note. So for example, if I'm going to play this note, what happens because of the nylon strings compared to if you've ever played, let's say, a guitar with steel strings, you have to work a little bit harder with the nylon. You have to push up a little further. This is a half step bend. So see, I'm testing it. I want a little bit sharp. Okay, that's about it. But often when I hear ukulele players doing bends, they're pretty far off. You gotta put that little extra bit of effort. And so that's a really common sound you hear. Those 7th chords. And another thing I was doing a little bit is I was muffling the strings. There's a technique called palm muting. You can put your palm down. It gives you this muffled sound. Sometimes if you listen to the real old Delta blues, they just keep the bass groove going. See how the higher strings are not muffled, so they ring out. Now what that is called a turnaround. That's another big part of the blues. Let's go up to the 5th fret, the 2nd string, and walk down 5, 3, 2, 1, and 0. And you can get back to an E chord. That's often the blues progression is E7, A7. It's called the 12-bar blues. back to E for 2 bars. A7. I'm using different voices, but all I'm thinking in my mind is A7, E7, E7, a fill. Here's the turnaround. B or B7 goes to that. A7, here's that line we practiced. So I did a little rhythmic variations. I walked up to the B there. So those are a couple of the ideas that you can do. Another thing, the last thing I'll say about getting that bluesy sound, it's very playful. When you play that pentatonic scale that I showed you, there's this G natural note. But when you play an E chord, there's a G sharp in there. It's one of those ideas, again, as is mentioned, bending notes. You play around with that difference between the minor sound and major. So you often hear things like a little hammer on from the 3rd string open to the 1st fret. So it's minor for a second, but then it resolves to the major. But then when you go to the A7th chord, it's definitely G natural. You leave those G sharps out, then it comes back to the G sharp over E. So you can actually start targeting some pitches over the chords. Now I'm going to go back to the G natural. See how that brings out that bluesy A7 sound? I'm going to go back to the G sharp. Kind of bending to it. Now over the B, there's another note. It's a D sharp. 4th fret of the 2nd string. But you can get the nasty sound, right? By playing a B natural against the B7th. So that's still that pentatonic. But if you want a little lift, when you get to that turnaround of the 5 chord, or B7, put in a D sharp, C sharp over A7 with a 7. Put in a little turnaround, and you're ready for action. Last line I'll show you. I love doing this is an old Delta blues vamp. Put your pinky on the 12th fret. What we're going to do, the high string, we're going to play the 12th fret of the 4th and the 2nd string. We're walking down from one version of E7, 12 and 12, it's going to 11, 11, 10, and 9, but you hold this pinky note on top. Robert Johnson would do this all the time, the great Delta blues player. Whether it's going to the B7 or at the very end of the song, you end on an E. That's E9 there. It's 6, 7, 7, 7. I'm actually borrowing with my 3rd finger. Alright, so I hope that gives you some ideas to work with. Learn the blues progression, learn that pentatonic scale, those dominant 7th chords. Look for that blue note and that difference between the major and the minor. Use some vibrato and bends. Use some muting. And main thing, have fun.